So welcome everyone to another episode of our podcast AdBites, where we look to lift the lid on all things Apple search ads. This podcast is brought to you by Redbox Mobile. We are an award-winning ASO company and an Apple search ads partner. If you haven't met me before, I'm your host, Samuel Chorlton. I'm the CTO at Redbox Mobile. And today we're going to be joined by Sema from Adjust. Here is Sema, and we're going to be discussing about acing attribution and how to drive the most valuable users via post-attribution analysis for Apple search ads. Bit of a mouthful of a title, I appreciate, but hopefully by the end of the session that'll make a bit more sense. But yeah, before we go any further, welcome Sema. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, Sam, on AdBites today. My name is Sema. I work as a solution consultant at Adjust, and my role is to provide mobile consultation to app owners from different verticals, gaming, fintech, and e-commerce. And my ultimate mission is to help them to drive the growth. And currently, I'm leading the solution consulting team in EMEA at Adjust.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sema. So just a reminder, this is a live Q&A session. So if you've got any questions that crop up as we're going through the session, please chuck them straight in the Q&A. If they're particularly relevant to what we're speaking about at that moment in time, I might pick up on them immediately. Otherwise, we'll kind of circle back at the end. As always, the session is being recorded, so it will be available post the end of today's session. So please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. So let's kind of jump straight into it, really. I personally only came to the kind of like digital marketing space about three years ago. And I remember hearing all this talk about attribution providers, MMPs, all these different terms were a bit kind of, well, what's all this about? What's the relationship? So I think it'd be quite useful to provide a bit of context to everyone, because people will have different levels of understanding. So what exactly is mobile attribution? And I guess, why is it important to people running UA campaigns?
Yeah, let's start with some basics then. So an attribution tool, let's call it MMP, Mobile Measurement Partner, and helps us to discover where your new users found you. For example, they're coming via influencer link or a Facebook campaign, or it could be App Store campaign. So in other words, mobile attribution is tying each install to the relevant ad engagements, such as click or impression. So at the end of today, as a marketer, you can use this attribution data to measure campaign performance, run effective retargeting campaigns, and ultimately take data-driven decisions. So it's really important today. When you first, launch your app, and then you need to scale up, maybe retain the loyal users. So there could be different motivation here. So being able to track how, who, when, and why of your new users allows you to determine the effect of your marketing investments and how valuable your new users are. So as a marketer, we will understand that we are not throwing away our budget and we are not fully blind. So we spend our budget effectively.
So I guess in kind of very simplistic terms, once you've created your app and connect it up to Apple search ads as an example, all you're getting tracking to at that point in time is up to the point of install if you're running an advertising campaign. And so the MMP is there to help you track what happens after the install. How does a developer or a client actually go about getting Adjust, in your case, to talk to their application and talk to Apple search ads?
So so at the end of the day, like, there is a SDK that we need to integrate to connect all these channels. So that's one of the very let's say common questions that we receive almost very often. And it's a fair question, though. So I would say straightforward, because today there's a SDK needs to be integrated. And when we consider that, today almost every app has more than one SDK. So after we have that, it's really straightforward that we can pull Apple Search Ads, for example, in this case, campaign data, installs, and we also have some default metrics such as install sessions, click impressions, re-engagement. So those will be by default.
Cool. And if anyone interested, so SDK is a software development kit. What you're basically looking at there is getting a set of kind of complex things that might be going on elsewhere, kind of converted down into a simple programming interface that allows you to kind of access the functionality of Adjust in this instance, or whoever your MMP is, directly within your code base. But traditionally, this is something that would be done by the app development team, or if you're a small company, that might just be you. But yeah, I know me and Sema have chatted about it before. Client-wise, they have everyone from sole app developers to huge clients as well. But so what's your experience in terms of how long does this process tend to take for individuals?
Yeah, my favorite question. So
Yeah.
and it's a very fair question because, like, as I said, today almost every app has more than one SDK, right? So it's as an experienced developer, it might take from 1 day to 2 weeks, I will say, because it's an open source SDK at Adjust. So if developers can easily see what's going on in the app and like what data is being passed to Adjust, and they can easily troubleshoot and debug the code. And in terms of duration, of course, it depends how much experience does the developer have. For example, I worked with a game developer once, and he literally told me that, hey, I did it in 10 minutes.
Wow.
But basic integration literally takes 10 minutes. But of course, when they say, okay, I need to add more events like custom events, let's say login, registration, level completed. So also deep linking, also ad revenue tracking. This might affect, let's say, the duration a bit. But on the other side, let's say we are working with a fintech client. So it may take up to 4 weeks, because imagine they have some audits, some penetration tests process, and some security assessments that they need to follow. So it's not only about adding SDK in the first place. So that's why it's really hard for us to answer this, but it really depends on the vertical, also like experience, I would say, also how dedicated the teams are focusing on this integration process.
So, and then I guess kind of within your code, what you're doing is basically going, when event happens, send some data to the MMP. I'd imagine one of the hardest bits is almost working out what's useful to send, what's not useful to send. How do I make sure I've got access to the revenue data, all of those sorts of things in order to include in that. So how kind of experienced are clients when they come to you in terms of what they should be tracking? Is that the sort of thing you can guide clients on when you traditionally talk to them?
Yeah, sure. As a part of consultancy, that's one of the very first questions that I ask to my clients, because KPIs must be aligned with their business goals and, of course, success criteria. So I simply ask, okay, what do you want to achieve? And the answer would be acquiring more users or increasing loyalty and driving more revenue. So it's very easy to answer these questions for some clients. However, some might need some guidance from us because they might be at the very beginning of their app journey. So as MMPs, we are happy to guide them with benchmarks and also the best practices. So maybe I can give some examples. Imagine if it's a hyper-casual gaming startup who are in the investment round. So they need to measure the number of installs and retention. And for an e-commerce client, so probably they will be expanding their business to new territories. Then they need to measure the LTV on country basis. And so overall, this depends the KPI choices. But at the end of the day, attribution data sheds light on the customer conversion funnel and allows apps to determine the most successful user acquisition strategy, and in terms of retention, monetization, and user acquisition.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I presume the kind of part of the the growth story for MMPs has been aligned with that move away from apps that are kind of revenue at the point of install, which going back 10 years was 95% of apps, and now it's probably less than 5% of apps that you're really paying for when you install them. So in order to understand whether you're paying too much, not enough, that's where the kind of the MMP comes in. In terms of kind of slicing up the data that you get out, what sort of options sit around that to kind of give those additional layers of understanding?
Exactly. I mean, so that would be, for example, when you first start with MMP, we will be providing a layer like with the basics, like install, sessions, click, impressions, re-engagement. But at the end of the day, it's really about aligning post-install activities with the business objectives. So for a banking app, it would be about like measuring registrations or the number of loan applications, and e-commerce number of purchases on maybe add to cart. And again, in gaming, they are keen on tracking how many people completed the tutorial, or it could be the users have completed a specific level and maybe bought some coins. So this really changes per vertical, and this must be aligned with the success criteria of the campaigns.
Because attribution isn't constrained to only working with paid media. It works with all kind of organic lead generation as well. How's that kind of represented for users? Kind of how does that help them?
So let me start with an example. So they really go together. For example, attribution data may reveal that the customer first discovered the app through an organic search result, but later on they click on a paid search and made a purchase. So this would indicate that the client's paid and organic search strategies are working together. So it really gives you some ideas about like how is your paid and organic strategies are working together.
Okay, that's really cool. I mean, it's from the way you describe it, it sounds super straightforward, super easy. Surely everyone must do it, but I'm sure there are challenging parts to it. What are some of the, I guess, the challenges you see arising?
Definitely there are some challenges. So I would say, so access to clean, reliable data. This is the key. But on the other hand, this must be challenging, right? So imagine today, an average marketer leverages 14 different channels. So, and it's important for them to preserve the data consistency. For example, in gaming, they are spending thousands of dollars a day, so that they need to optimize campaigns, creatives based on accurate ROAS. And on the other hand, when we think about all these partners, especially social media networks, they have different attribution window logic. So there might be some discrepancies, which should be resolved by MMP provider. And even though, like, let's say, even we tick all these boxes, a client will still need the manpower to sort the results and like optimize the bid and budgets. Because today, when you think about like all these channels strategy, like there is a lot of noise from the data. So they might need to optimize bid and budgets and maybe pause inefficient campaigns. So this requires automation. And at this point, I usually recommend my clients to use our automation tool.
I mean, you guys must be in a kind of pretty unique position in some respects of actually being able to see what the industry trends look like in terms of how much spend's going on Apple search ads, how much is going towards UAC, all the other variations. Like that must be quite an interesting just kind of data set to be able to interrogate. Anyway, I know that's just me
it's
rambling
like processing petabytes every day.
Yeah, that must be really cool. But yeah, so obviously we're kind of specifically focused on Apple search ads in these sessions, but are there different attribution? Are there specific attribution challenges to Apple search ads in particular?
So in terms of tracking, that's one of my favorite because Apple has an attribution API. And once you add that framework to the code, it runs smoothly. Like we pull everything from the SDK side. And like on the data side, they provide campaign data within the granularity of keywords. And on top of that, imagine we add post-install data such as lifetime value, retention. So MMP work really hand in hand with Apple Search Ads. So the real challenge comes up when you work with too many keywords and increasingly test new ones. That's how it works today, right? For the sake of time efficiency, you can automate these keywords and update bidden budgets very often. So for example, once I work with a utility app and they increase their installs over 100% on Apple Search Ads just by automating. Because when you automate your campaigns, the teams can focus on more strategy side of things instead of doing repetitive tasks. And this will allow to compete with that challenge to running different keywords and track and optimize.
So I guess kind of building on that, what are your kind of what are your general kind of recommendations around kind of search results, ad campaigns within Apple Search Ads from an MMP perspective?
So I would say App Store is increasingly competitive. We all know that. So marketers should keep testing and exploring the new keywords on different ad groups and maybe countries. So they should use, for example, targeted audience and different demographics. This will also help a lot to vary the audience. And in order to eliminate the noise, especially out of reporting, they should be defining key optimization metrics such as installs, ROAS, CPI, or retention. And when it comes to the broad match and exact match terms for the best results, they should be running both, so they can also discover new and adapt those to their keyword strategy and search strategy. And also, as I mentioned earlier, automation is highly recommended. This way, they can launch dozens of campaigns and manage them with a higher efficiency. So they won't be losing money, and immediately they can take actions. And of course, the team can focus on building the strategy. So I think those would be my piece of advice from MMP perspective.
And I think just to kind of build on that, really, one of the bits was we advise clients where they can to try and optimize towards a discrete post-install event, like a registration or a subscription, or also to look at a kind of ROAS, kind of return on advertising spend-based advertisement. And I think when you're looking to do that, one of the things to be conscious of is what your likely conversion rate is. And if you've got experience with that, you might have a good sense. And then secondly, on top of that, it's what type of volumes. If you go for a very, very low funnel event, you're going to get quite a strong degree of drop off between the point of the tap or the install going down to what your actual target event or your revenue targets are. So it's worth, what we tend to advise clients to do is to have what you would view as an acceptable cost per install target, and to use that as a starting point till you can build up a knowledge base around your cost on your revenue basis. And then you can kind of do those secondary optimizations. If you've got an automation tool that can complete that process for you, then great. If you're doing it on a manual basis, then don't kind of rush that process. It's really important that you're actually doing it in a data-led fashion and starting to build up that picture of where the performance is coming from, and doing that on an ongoing basis. Where it becomes very challenging is if, as Sema mentioned, you're running on 250, 300 keywords. That's a lot to manually maintain, but you might want to start with just a few keywords just to kind of test the waters and then scale it out from there. And that's where that kind of automation value comes in. So I guess it'd be really good to actually talk about scale of the types of clients that you're that you're working with. And I guess from my perspective, if you've seen a change in that, was traditionally it just big brands and then now it's more big brands and indie? How's that kind of picture looking like?
So overall, MMP is not just for big brands, and especially there are some strategies that we can build for the startups as well. So no matter the size of the app, attribution data has a role to play. For example, as a beginner, let's say you would probably want to scale your app first. That means you need to acquire more users. So you need to constantly test new channels for that. On MMP dashboard, you can see which of these are effective for you. And apart from that, you may discover if there are any glitches on your conversion funnel. So maybe you can detect that if users are leaving app without purchases. And you will have the visibility of organic versus paid, which we already talked, and you can compare sessions and retention accordingly, day by day, even hour. And another best practice would be that you can do A/B test. So you can discover the most effective creatives per channel, and MMP can help you to explore these type of things here. And there would be one thing that you already mentioned like a few minutes ago. So at some point, you can even ask MMP to provide some benchmarks, like per country, CPIs. So you don't have to start testing channels as fully blind. For example, you can see the CPI benchmarks per vertical and region. And so it will help you to have an idea about, oh, I'm doing good or throwing some money away. And especially in gaming, they are doing too many type of tests that I witness. Sometimes they do even before they launching the game. So that's very smart, this one. So for example, they are checking the hype for the game. So they are generating some creatives and checking the click-through rates. When they see the hype, they are seeing that, okay, this game will work. So they are just completing the launch, full launch, and or even developing the game. So it's kind of understanding the interest on that game, because imagine they are launching 100 games like every quarter that I see. And another point would be that using MMP, of course, it will be hand in hand with your CRM activities like QR codes, push notifications, web to app. So we can deliver insights about loyalty and retention based on that. Those would be also really good to include on your user acquisition strategy when you first start with MMP.
It's really interesting. And I can really see, especially if you're a small indie developer that's got a very limited marketing budget, but wants to operate across multiple channels, you really need to understand which of those channels is driving the most value for you. And I guess it's not completely prohibitive not having an MMP. I guess you can do some of these elements manually. How would somebody go around doing that if they wanted to?
Yes. So the channels make this data available to clients. For example, if you go to Apple searches, of course, you will see the performance of your campaigns. But the thing is, when you have multiple strategies across multiple channels, it can take a lot of manual effort, and you need to cross-check the data. And channel integration with an MMP cuts out of juggling between different dashboards, and also we will be providing a source of truth to marketers. So you can create any reports that you want to focus on, and you don't have to spend your time or your team's time on different dashboards. And on the technical side, there's also one thing that developers love it. You will do all of these with one SDK. Otherwise, you need to install all the SDKs for different channels.
Yeah, no, and from a development viewpoint, someone else is maintaining all of those interfaces for you. You don't have to do it, which is a huge cost and time saving. So, I mean, looking specifically at Apple search ads, I mean, one of the core reasons to use an MMP is to improve the quality of my users or improve their lifetime value. What are your thoughts about approaching this? Should clients have a roadmap, a strategy? What's the kind of general recommendations?
I think at this point, we can talk about leveraging the post-install data from search result campaigns so that you can increase the quality of organic traffic. So how it works. For example, a keyword with a lower rank may bring you with a high conversion, may bring you high conversion rate, or it could be LTV. So when you see that, you may want to adapt this keyword to your ASO strategy. So you can improve the quality of organic traffic because you will be using the best working keywords and maybe visuals there. And another example would be testing custom product pages, CPPs. Maybe we hear this very often, and which is a really cool feature from App Store, by the way. You can test different audience groups and redirect users to different custom product pages based on the seasonality, and of course, measure the high value users there. So you will have more flexibility on that as well.
Cool. And I mean, yeah, that's super important. I think, yeah, I mean, it's very rare we come across a client now that isn't using some form of MMP or looking to use some form of MMP. One of the important bits we're often talking to clients about is making sure that you're keeping your attribution provider SDK up to date, because you're relying on that to make sure it's talking to the most up-to-date versions of Apple's attribution API as well. One of the bits that, again, this confused me at the start, is we hear a lot of people talking about MMPs. We hear them talking about kind of in-app behavioral monitoring services like Firebase. I'm sure there are other ones out there that people use as well. Where do they kind of fit into the picture?
As MMPs, to be honest, we receive this question very often. So, for example, they're like saying, I have Firebase, should I use MMP as well? So my recommendation would be usually using them both. Since Firebase, for example, let's talk about Firebase, we started with that. Firebase provides in-app analytics and also some visibility to crash reports. So also, of course, it does a lot of other things. Whereas MMP can connect thousands of partners and provide you the performance of your campaigns besides in-app user behavior. And at the end of the day, the good thing is MMPs can provide paid source of these users and pass this data to analytics tool. So you can combine this together and manage your CRM activities. So they go again hand in hand here. Like we also like at Just Connect, like many analytics partners, they should be strategizing together. And the last but not least, we clean your data from fraudulent traffic, like when you compare like Firebase and the MMPs.
Cool. I mean, there's a couple of this has been a super interesting discussion. I know we haven't got ages left, and I guess like many industries, we're a big fan of our buzzwords, hearing a lot of talk about deep linking at the moment. I'm sure there's a lot of misuse of terms like deep linking as well. But what is it? Where's that kind of fit into the picture?
Before I answer this, let me take a step back and explain deep linking. And then I will continue with the MMP part. Sometimes this might be very confusing. So in order to leverage deep linking, your application technically must have a deep linking configuration, which helps you to redirect your users to an in-app page. So apart from MMP, on the MMP side, we provide campaign links, which redirect users to App Store, and we measure conversion coming from there. So we can combine these two technologies, meaning that when you have a campaign link from MMP, you can append your deep link to that link. So it will redirect users from an ad click to the specific page. So as you know, MMP links can be used on influencer campaigns, social media, email newsletters. So we see those links very often in our everyday life. For example, today we all know that influencer marketing takes a lot of space on the e-commerce marketing strategy. Probably that's why we hear this buzzword a lot. And when we see those links, you will probably see that they are promoting a product, specific product. Imagine you see the link and then click on it. After that, it's very vital to vital for the users to land on that product page, right? Otherwise, the whole journey is broken and you will have no idea about whether that person bought that item or not. So I can also give another example from banking, for example. So let's say as a banking app, you offer a very special mortgage rate. So your users wants to, so you can let your users to land on specific mortgage campaign, so you can speed up the application process. So you can do a lot of different use cases per vertical industry to measure the success with deep links.
Cool. Okay, I mean that's really useful to provide some context around it. I mean, I guess from a kind of forward-looking perspective, is attribution a solved problem? Is there scope to do more with it? Where is that kind of going?
So as MMPs for the last year, we've been already adapting ourselves mostly on the regulations and privacy side of things. So on the MMP side, our products are evolving to provide marketers to do more with less data, because now there is like, everyone knows that buzzword as well, aggregated data, right? We keep helping marketers to get most out of their attribution data by focusing on predictive and incremental metrics. So at the end of the day, we will keep helping marketers to take data-driven decisions. So that will be always our ultimate goal. And this might be my personal opinion, but I would recommend all app owners to own their data and mine it, just to at least keep it for the future somewhere on a cloud bucket or their servers. So because big brands, let's say such as Spotify, Walmart, Uber, they are now figuring out how to monetize their first party data. And looks like big brands will become ad networks. So brands with extensive user pools, if they combine with a good opt-in rate, so they will likely to succeed.
Cool. That's a very interesting picture. And when you talk about making use of less data through the use of prediction and those sorts of things, is that, I guess, relying on the fact that the smaller volumes that you're seeing are still kind of statistically representative of the wider corpus, and therefore you're kind of extrapolating what you're seeing to a wider scale? Is that the kind of basic premise behind it?
So after the regulations, so there is now we have opted-in users. So MMPs, we can only have that. But the thing is, we've been always working with the aggregated data. So if at the end of the day, if you know how to strategize, like how to use that data, and that would work. But now, of course, we have some limitations for the non-opt-in data. So in that case, we are MMPs working on predictive metrics. And already I heard from some big brands that they're also working on their predictive metrics. So this is how the how all these industry will work in the end. But still, with the let's say with the automation, with the cleaning the data from fraud, or it could be giving you exact actionable recommendation from the reporting, MMP will be supporting all marketers to take data-driven decisions.
Brilliant. Thanks. I mean, yeah, I think we're kind of approaching the end of the session. It's been absolutely interesting to kind of go through and kind of dig into some of these areas in detail. I think kind of the one big takeaway that everyone, and I know you kind of mentioned it at the end, is the more data you're pulling into it, the more comprehensive a picture you've got, and the more data informed or data driven the decisions are that you can make. Attribution is an element of that. The advertising channels also have a picture of it, and you have a picture within your own app as well. And it's only when you kind of combine all that data and you kind of really start to make informed decisions. But I mean, from a data viewpoint, you can keep stepping out wider and wider. There's so many different influences, and you really want to kind of factor as much of that in as possible. But thanks ever so much, Sema, for your time. Thank you everyone for joining.